Welcome to Purgatory, the ultimate waiting room. You've made it this far, but now you're stuck in the Afterlife's version of an eternal DMV line, without the magazines. Whether you're here because of unfinished business, questionable life decisions, or you just got lost on your way to the pearly gates. One thing is certain. There's no fast pass, and you'll be here a while. Now, before you panic and start asking deep existential questions like, how long is this going to take? Or, what exactly did I do to get here? Take a deep breath, or whatever the spirit world equivalent of breathing is. Surviving Purgatory isn't about rushing to the finish line. It's about keeping your cool, finding ways to pass the time, and maybe learning a thing or two about yourself along the way. This guide is your lifeline to navigating the endless waiting room of the afterlife. Whether it's learning the art of patience, finding a hobby to keep your mind occupied, or avoiding the traps of false exits, we've got you covered. Don't worry, we'll get through this together. After all, eternity is only as long as you make it. So, grab a metaphorical seat, get comfortable, and let's figure out how to survive Purgatory with your sanity and sense of humor intact. Tip 1. Accept the waiting. There's no fast pass in Purgatory. The first rule of Purgatory: time isn't your friend. In fact, you've probably already noticed that it's a bit warped here. Days, hours, who knows? In Purgatory, time moves at its own leisurely pace, which is to say, not at all. And if you're thinking about rushing through this stage, I've got some bad news for you. There's no fast pass, no express lane, and definitely no cutting the line. This isn't Disney World, after all. The key to surviving Purgatory is simple: accept the waiting. You're here for the long haul, so you might as well get comfortable with the concept of Limbo. Sure, it's not exactly glamorous, but resisting the inevitable waiting game will only make things worse. Fighting it? Futile. Complaining? Pointless. Just think of it as one of those old dial-up connections from the 90s. You can't rush it, and you'll just have to let it load. The trick is to make peace with the fact that you're not going anywhere soon. Patience will become your best friend. You'll need to take a deep breath and embrace the stillness. Hey, maybe this is the break you never knew you needed. No deadlines, no alarms, and no stress about being late for anything. You can finally just exist. The waiting might not be exciting, but there's a certain charm in not having anywhere to be. Instead of constantly thinking about how long you'll be stuck here, focus on mastering the art of being in the moment. Find small ways to entertain yourself. Trust me, we'll get to that later. And use this time as a chance to reflect on how you ended up here in the first place. After all, Purgatory isn't just about waiting. It's about learning something along the way. And hey, you've got plenty of time for that now. Tip 2. Find a hobby. Eternity is a long time. So, you've accepted that time isn't exactly moving, and now you're stuck with the challenge of passing it. Welcome to your next task: finding a hobby. In Purgatory, there are no day planners, no to-do lists, and definitely no Netflix to binge. So you're going to have to get creative. Eternity is a long time to just sit around, so finding something to occupy your mind is crucial to your survival. Start small. You're not looking to master a new skill here. This isn't a learn to knit in 30 days kind of situation, unless knitting is your thing, in which case go wild. Maybe cloud watching is more your speed, or mentally replaying your favorite movies in painstaking detail. How many times can you recall every line from The Godfather or Star Wars? Challenge yourself, and see if you can create new endings. It may not be groundbreaking entertainment, but hey, it's something. If you're the social type, find some other souls and form a hobby club. Maybe you start a purgatorial book club. Except, without actual books. You can discuss the great literary works of your life, or make up stories based on what you wish you'd read. Or, if that's not your style, start a debate group on the big questions of existence. Who was the greatest band of all time? Or, what's the meaning of life? Spoiler alert, no one knows, but it'll kill some time. Of course, if group activities aren't your thing, you can always stick to solo hobbies. Consider counting the grains of sand at your feet. There's always sand in purgatory for some reason. Or perfect your internal monologue until you're convinced you've achieved inner peace. Whatever hobby you choose, the goal is to keep your mind busy and engaged. After all, eternity can get boring fast if you don't give yourself something to focus on. Tip 3. Befriend the other lost souls. While you're stuck in the waiting room of eternity, remember that you're not alone. There are plenty of other souls floating around, equally confused and equally stuck. Sure, they might look a little lost, maybe a bit grumpy, or even downright philosophical about the whole situation. But these are your fellow travelers in Limbo. And trust me, befriending them will make the time go by a lot faster. First things first. Introductions might be a bit awkward. Hi, I'm your name. I'm stuck here too. Doesn't have the same ring as it did back in life. But don't let that stop you. Starting up a conversation can break the monotony of your own thoughts. Ask about their journey, or whether they have any tips for surviving purgatory. Bonus points if they've been here longer than you. They might know some tricks. Making friends in purgatory is like forming a little survival squad. Together, you can swap stories, debate the meaning of life and death, or even start a makeshift support group for souls who still don't understand why they ended up here. The important thing is that you'll have someone to share the experience with. No more walking in circles by yourself. Now, you've got a buddy to do it with. Who knows, you might even get a few laughs out of it. Imagine the shared horror stories about those false exits or failed attempts to escape. More on that later. And when you've been in limbo long enough, a good joke or a shared moment of existential dread is worth its weight in gold. Just remember, misery loves company, and in purgatory, you've got plenty of both. So don't be shy. Befriend your fellow lost souls, form alliances, and keep each other sane. After all, eternity is a lot more bearable when you've got someone to laugh or cry with. Tip 4. Don't ask, "How long have you been here?" It's rude. Asking someone how long they've been stuck in purgatory is the equivalent of asking someone their age. Just don't do it. Time works differently here. And let's be honest, no one really wants to dwell on the fact that they've been waiting for an eternity. It's like reminding someone how long they've been in line at the DMV. Except the DMV eventually moves. When you first arrive, it's natural to be curious. You'll see other souls wandering around, maybe sitting with a distant, glazed-over look, and you'll be tempted to ask, "So, how long have you been here?" But trust me, that's not a conversation opener. Purgatory's unofficial rulebook says we don't talk about time. No one likes to think about how long they've been in this limbo, especially since the answer is probably way too long. Instead of asking about time, focus on the here and now. Find common ground. Maybe ask if they've discovered any false exits or what hobby they've picked up to pass the time. See tip 2. It's less awkward, and you won't accidentally trigger someone's existential crisis. Plus, in a place where time is fluid, there's really no point in counting the hours, days, or centuries. It's all relative. Another reason to avoid time-based questions. You don't want to remind yourself how long you've been here either. The moment you start thinking about it, you'll spiral into the "how long will this take" loop. And that's a dangerous road to go down. Stay present. Don't think about the past or the future. Both are out of your control at this point. So, be considerate. Keep conversations light. And remember, in purgatory, time isn't the issue. It's all about surviving the present. And no one needs the reminder that they've been waiting longer than their patience can handle. Tip 5. Resist the urge to wander. You don't want to get lost here. It might be tempting to explore purgatory's endless expanse of nothingness, especially after realizing you're going to be here for a while. Maybe there's something interesting just beyond that distant fog. Or perhaps if you wander far enough, you'll stumble upon a hidden exit. But before you channel your inner adventurer, heed this advice. Don't. Purgatory isn't exactly well marked, and there are no maps to guide you. The last thing you want is to wander off and find yourself in the purgatorial equivalent of a dead end with no one around to help you. Think of it like being lost in a giant cosmic IKEA without the shortcuts. You'll end up going in circles, retracing your steps, and regretting your decision to leave the relative safety of where you started. Even worse, Purgatory has a strange way of disorienting you the further you roam. There's no compass, no North Star, and certainly no "you are here" signs to give you a sense of direction. It's easy to get turned around and find yourself deeper in limbo, far from anything familiar. And let's be honest, there's nothing quite as unsettling as being lost in a place where time and space don't play by the usual rules. Instead, stick to the familiar territory. If you've already claimed a little corner of Purgatory, make it your home base. Find a few landmarks, a rock, a misty tree, maybe a fellow lost soul who hasn't wandered off either. Familiarity, as boring as it sounds, is your best friend here. In short, keep your curiosity in check. Purgatory may seem vast and open, but it's also a trap for those who think they can outwalk eternity. Stay put, stay safe, and resist the urge to go on a soul-searching stroll, pun intended. Tip 6. Watch out for false exits. They're just teasing you. At some point in your stay here, you're going to see it. The glowing doorway, the mysterious staircase leading upward, or a shimmering tunnel that looks like it leads to freedom. Don't get excited. This isn't your ticket out of Purgatory. In fact, it's more of a cosmic joke designed to test your patience, or worse, trap you in an endless loop of hope and disappointment. These false exits are everywhere. They appear when you least expect them, offering a glimpse of an escape just within reach. You might see fellow souls sprinting toward them with a gleam of desperation in their eyes, only to find that the so-called exit leads to the exact spot they started. It's like walking through a revolving door, but instead of stepping outside, you're right back where you began. Only now, you're a little more annoyed. It's tempting to chase after every glowing door or stairway that appears in front of you. After all, who wouldn't want to believe there's an end to this waiting? But here's the thing. Chasing these exits only prolongs your stay. The more you run after them, the more they pop up, and the more frustrated you become when they lead nowhere. It's a cruel cycle, and one that has claimed many a hopeful soul. So, what's the best strategy? Ignore them. I know, it's easier said than done. But the sooner you stop falling for these celestial pranks, the more peace you'll find in Purgatory. Think of them as tests. You're being challenged to stay calm, stay focused, and avoid the trap of false hope. When the real exit appears, if it ever does, trust me, you'll know. In the meantime, resist the urge to bolt for every shimmering light. Purgatory is all about patience, and those false exits are just another test of how much you've learned. Tip 7. Embrace the existential crises. They're unavoidable. Let's be honest. At some point, you're going to start asking yourself the big questions. Why am I here? What did I do to deserve this? Is there even a point to all of this waiting? Congratulations. You've entered the existential crisis phase of Purgatory. Don't worry, it happens to everyone. You might as well embrace it because there's no avoiding it. Existential crises are like the cosmic background noise of Purgatory. When you're stuck in a place where time doesn't seem to move and there's nothing to do but think. Deep thoughts are inevitable. You'll start wondering about your life choices, the meaning of existence, and whether or not you left the stove on back in the living world. It's normal, and in some strange way, it's part of the process. The trick to surviving this phase? Don't fight it. Trying to suppress those heavy thoughts will only make them louder. Instead, let yourself dive into the deep end of your own thoughts. Ponder the mysteries of life, death, and everything in between. After all, this is what Purgatory is for, right? It's not just a waiting room. It's a place for reflection and growth. Think of it as the universe's way of giving you time to figure some stuff out before you move on. But here's the key. Don't get too lost in your thoughts. There's a fine line between healthy introspection and spiraling into existential dread. If you start feeling overwhelmed by the weight of it all, take a break. Talk to a fellow lost soul. Focus on your hobby. Remember tip 2. Or distract yourself with something trivial. Balance is essential when it comes to pondering the meaning of life. So, embrace the inevitable existential crises, but but don't let them consume you. Think of it as mental exercise. Important, but best done in moderation. After all, you've got eternity to figure it all out. Tip 8. Don't fall into the trap of doing nothing. Purgatory is a place where time seems infinite, but doing nothing can make it feel even longer. While it might be tempting to sit back and wait for something, anything to happen. That's exactly how you get stuck in the dreaded purgatorial funk. Doing nothing sounds peaceful at first, but eventually it becomes your worst enemy. Let's face it, sitting around waiting for eternity to pass isn't exactly the most exciting way to spend, well, eternity. The trick is to avoid falling into the trap of complete inertia. While it's okay to relax, after all, you've got nowhere else to be. Make sure you're not letting the endless stretch of time turn you into a statue. Purgatory has a funny way of lulling you into a sense of timelessness. And before you know it, days or centuries have passed without you even realizing it. Keep your mind active, even if that just means daydreaming up weird scenarios, like, what if Purgatory had its own reality TV show? Who would get voted off first? You might also want to get creative in ways that you wouldn't have thought of before. Ever wanted to try your hand at improv comedy? There's no audience here to judge you, so why not? Make up stories, tell yourself jokes, or come up with a fantasy scenario where you've become the ruler of Purgatory, complete with a throne made of clouds. It sounds silly, but the more you entertain your mind, the less likely you are to slip into the mind-numbing boredom that Purgatory is famous for. On the other hand, remember that nothing in Purgatory is ever really nothing. Even in the quiet moments, there's something to reflect on, something to notice, and maybe something to laugh about. The key is to not let the stillness turn into a void. Stay engaged in whatever small way you can, even if it's as simple as making up your own rules for how Purgatory works. Because if you do nothing, you risk getting lost in the one thing Purgatory is known for: an endless, soul-sucking wait. Tip 9. Stay positive. The sorting will happen. Eventually. In Purgatory, the one thing that will truly test your endurance is uncertainty. You're stuck, waiting for the big cosmic sorting hat to decide where you'll go next, upstairs or downstairs. It's easy to feel like you've been forgotten in this strange middle ground, like a letter that's lost in the mail, but don't let that get to you. Stay positive. Why? Because eventually, the sorting will happen. Sure, it might feel like you've been waiting for an eternity, because, well, you have. But there's a system in place, even if it feels like it's moving slower than a DMV line. Your name will come up, and when it does, you want to be ready. In the meantime, think of Purgatory as a cosmic waiting room. You wouldn't want to walk into your next destination in a grumpy mood, would you? Keep your spirits high, and focus on the silver lining. You're still here, which means you still have time to make an impression, reflect, or maybe even get bumped up the priority list. One way to stay positive is to remind yourself that this isn't the end. It's a transition. You're in the in-between, and while it may seem endless, it's just a temporary stop. So what if you're on hold for a bit? At least you're not dealing with the stresses of mortal life anymore. No rent to pay, no alarm clocks, and definitely no more taxes. That's something worth celebrating, right? And if you ever find yourself feeling down, remember, no one stays in Purgatory forever, unless that's like your thing. But let's stay optimistic. You will get sorted, and when you do, it'll all make sense. So keep your chin up, keep smiling, and know that every day you spend in Purgatory is one step closer to your final destination, wherever that may be. Tip 10. Don't forget why you're here. This is a second chance. In the endless waiting game that is Purgatory, it's easy to forget why you're here in the first place. You might feel stuck, aimless, and a little annoyed by the lack of movement. But let's take a step back and remember, Purgatory is more than just a waiting room. It's a second chance. You're not here by accident. There's a reason you haven't been sorted yet, and now's the time to figure it out. This place isn't just about killing time until the final call. It's about reflection. Maybe there's something you need to make peace with. Or perhaps there's a lesson you didn't quite learn in life. Purgatory is giving you the opportunity to do some serious soul-searching, literally. Whether it's past regrets, unfinished business, or just a moment of clarity, this is your chance to confront whatever it is that landed you here. Take some time to think about the life you led. What would you change if you could? What choices would you make differently? It's not about dwelling on mistakes. It's about understanding them. After all, this is the universe's way of saying, hey, you've got another shot at getting things right. It might not feel like it, but being stuck in purgatory is a blessing in disguise. You're being given the time and space to reflect before your final destination is decided. So, don't waste this second chance. Use it wisely. Reflect, learn, grow, and maybe even make peace with whatever's keeping you in limbo. Purgatory isn't forever, unless you really, really want it to be. But it's a critical moment in your afterlife journey. Embrace it, learn from it, and when the time comes for you to move on, you'll be ready. Well, you've made it to the end of our guide on surviving purgatory. Congratulations. You've weathered the existential crises, dodged the false exits, and embraced the fine art of waiting like a pro. But more importantly, you've kept your sanity intact, hopefully, and maybe even learned a thing or two along the way. Purgatory isn't just about sitting around and twiddling your thumbs. It's about reflection, patience, and perhaps gaining a new perspective on your past life. Remember, purgatory may feel like a long, winding road to nowhere, but it's really just a pit stop. A place to catch your breath, metaphorically speaking, and prepare for whatever comes next. Whether it's ascending to the great beyond or a journey somewhere a bit warmer, you're better prepared now. You've found ways to keep busy, connected with other souls in limbo, and most importantly, learned that time here doesn't define you. How you use that time does. So while the cosmic sorting process might be slower than you'd like, hang in there. The universe has a plan, even if it feels like the celestial paperwork is backlogged for eternity. Keep reflecting, keep growing, and keep your sense of humor alive. It's the one thing purgatory can't take from you. And when the time comes for you to move on, whether up or down, you'll step through that final door with a little more wisdom and a lot more patience. In the end, purgatory isn't the end of the road. It's just the place where you learn how to appreciate the journey.